Welcome everybody to the Red Pilled Fiction Factory podcast. We've got two very special things happening this week. We've got myself, Corporate Clarke, as the guest host, and we've got our second returning author, R.J. Smith, who is the author of a wonderful trilogy called the City Limits Trilogy, and we're talking about the third book released chronologically, although there's no particular chronological order to the trilogy. That's right, isn't it? The third one released chronologically.
Yeah, the third one is actually the first one I wrote.
Oh, right, okay, well, we can get into that as well.
We'll get into that. Right.
Called Zona Sul Nights, and it's based in Rio de Janeiro. And I'll let RJ give a little introduction, a little synopsis of what the story is about before we jump into it in detail.
Sure. So the story is about an American doctoral candidate who's just broken up with his girlfriend under unfortunate circumstances, namely her cheating on him, and him really wanting an escape and something just totally new, just a new start, anything but the way his life had been up to that moment. So he learns about an opportunity to go to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil as a kind of secondment, an academic placement. So he goes there just sort of totally open to every new experience, saying yes to everything, or willing to say yes to everything. And his desire to escape and his lack of any sort of anchor to anything to keep him on the rails obviously inevitably leads him off the rails. And so it's about, really the thesis of the book is when he arrives in Rio, he sees someone on the side of the road and sort of, a homeless person, and wonders, how does a person end up in that position? And I don't think it spoils the book to say that he will get to a similar endpoint himself. And so what I wanted to do is explore how could this happen to a middle-class American academic, an intelligent person? How could you end up in that position plausibly? Mm-hmm. That's what I attempted to do in the book.
I think you did it very well, actually. This is the second of the three that I've read, the other being Dream City. And Dream City has a setting which is a lot more sterile. So you said the books were they're connected through themes rather than stories, although there is some common characters. But in Dream City, it's very sterile. It's this man in this manufactured, man-made environment. He's kind of living in a casino hotel. And in Zona Sul Nights, a man is kind of escaping a relatively sterile environment in kind of this academic environment and going to this wonderfully organic, and the book sweats with atmosphere, and it was a real contrast. Was it? Do you want to tell us, because I think you've spent some time in Rio, so tell us about some of the time you spent there, if and how that inspired things, and if it was a conscious choice to choose these different settings, or whether it just kind of arose organically. Do you want to go into that?
Sure. Well, the thing which links them is the fact that I'm interested in the psychological effect places have on people. If anyone has read J.G. Ballard, that is sort of the mood behind some of J.G. Ballard's books, at least, but especially his novel High Rise. So that's the general point of interest for me. And the other thing that I'm interested in is the paranoia that built environments cause to people. So in the case of Sydney, where Dream City is set, that's my hometown. It's really not a city which would make a person paranoid. I mean, it's a beautiful city. It's a luminous city. It's a safe city. It's a great place to live. The living standards are extremely high. However, that's why I chose this setting of the casino, because it's fully under CCTV camera. It's a very strange sort of psychological environment. So that's why I chose the relatively sterile background for the first book. Rio, the paranoia is all there immediately. I mean, you're a gringo, you're a target. It's as simple as that. I was robbed twice in my 8 months in Rio. I lived there in 2012. And that happened pretty early on in my stay. Those two unfortunate incidents, both of which were in large part my fault, by the way. But nevertheless, it was sort of eye-opening about the dangers that lurk in this extraordinarily beautiful city, but also extraordinarily dangerous city. The first half of the book is mostly autobiographical. So, I'm probably rendering myself liable to several criminal offenses in saying that. But most of the first half of the book is autobiographical, unlike Dream City, which is not autobiographical at all. It's purely imagined. So yeah, that's I guess in short the difference between the two.
And one smart part of the book is where you talk about the city being a lie. You say, I think Rio de Janeiro means River of January, because when the Portuguese discovered it, they thought it was the mouth of a river, and so the whole city is established on a lie. And the sort of try to think of another word for lie, but the sort of layer of lies that's everywhere in all his interactions. And in fact, probably his only genuine interaction is with the Catholic girl that he meets, and he manages to ruin that himself. So, and nobody's quite who they appear to be. At one point, he thinks the reporter, Anton is the reporter, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He thinks that Anton's kind of genuine, but then maybe doubts that he's actually part of the gang, serving his own interests. So, is that something you really felt when you were there, that everybody potentially had more than one side to them?
Yeah, I mean, after this, the robbery, it's told in the chapter entitled "The Stick Up," which is pretty sort of telling as to what happens in the chapter. After that happened to me in relatively similar circumstances, I experienced a genuine and deep paranoia. I really thought I was going to be bundled into a van and no one would ever hear from me again. And when you realize, wow, I'm really out of my depth here. I don't belong here. I don't know how to talk my way out of trouble here, except with the limited cash that I have. And I don't know what might happen. So yeah, certainly the paranoia was very real, and that colored my interactions with people for quite a while after. In the end, it was a great experience. But certainly, I think that particular feeling I had of real peril is probably what was the main driver behind not just this book, but all of the books, because as you observed, the theme of paranoia is really the overriding theme in the two you've read, but certainly all three. So yeah.
There's a real visceral presence of class and caste in this book as well. So you feel it, like you mentioned earlier, kind of like the gringos are one class, the locals are a different class, and then you point out that the favelas are unusually up high in the heavens, and the expensive apartments and areas are down by the beach, I suppose. Was that you present it very well, but you describe a little bit how you felt that when you were there in Rio as well.
Yeah. So the point of moving into the favela is also true. I did live in a favela, and the reasons are told in the book pretty accurately. I met a local guy who was, just a nice guy, and he went to the same university as me. He was a carioca. He grew up in Rio, And he said he had a place and it was cheap. And so I moved in with him. And of course, that exposed me to, he was a scholarship student at the university, by the way. That's why, because it was a private university that I studied at. I mean, it was funded by my home university, which is a public university, but it was a private university in Rio. So the local kids in general were very wealthy, very white, etc. And the university is in the suburb of, I think it's in Leblon, which is the richest suburb in Rio, if not in the whole of Brazil. So there's this extraordinary contrast that you have, going from literally the poorest or one of the poorest parts of the city to one of the richest. And inevitably, this contrast stirs the imagination. And and the observation as well of, it's sort of like, I think I make the comparison, it's like Los Angeles inverted, in the sense that in LA, the rich people live in the hills because you have the best view. Whereas in Rio, because of the peculiar history, the poorest people have, the most stunning views of this naturally beautiful city.
And I think the other element that really kind of cements the city, and that doesn't appear in Dream City either, is the presence of music is really strong. And there's a lot of talk about the real Brazilian music, and I think it's stuff from like the 50s and 60s you're talking about, maybe a bit later. But was that something you got into when you were there as well, and why did you decide to bring that into the book?
Simply because, the character of Caio, I'm not sure if you recall this guy from Sao Paulo, is a real guy. I'm sort of contradicting my little disclaimer at the beginning of the book. But I won't say names. Caio is based on a real character who lived at the time in Sao Paulo, now lives in Prague. But he was a musician and a graphic designer, and was really just into music, and exposed me to a lot of Brazilian music, especially from the 1960s, the Tropicalia music, which I found really powerful because this was a time of enormous government censorship. So music was a kind of form of political subversion. So certainly that was an important aspect of my time in Brazil. And the book, you don't sort of I'm not sure if it's the same for yourself, but for me, it's not a rational exercise. It's just sort of, it starts with an idea or a place or an aesthetic or a mood, and you just roll with it, and the rest is editing.
Yes. You just get one thing stuck in your head, and sometimes for when I've written a story, I've just had the cover of it in my head. I've just known what I wanted, kind of like the cover or the picture at the top of the post to be. Yeah. And that's how and I just couldn't get a certain image or something out of my head, and I had to write something that suited it. But yeah, it starts in strange ways.
That's it. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yeah.
So this is a trilogy, but loosely a trilogy, and there's a character that weaves throughout all three stories, but they are connected rather than kind of through plot and chronology. They're connected through theme, and in the two that you've that I've read so far, the theme seems to be that a man is escaping a sort of sterile, limiting situation. In which, and he's usually, he may have been betrayed in some way, because in Dream City there's some, well, it's not so much well, the betrayal is that the legal profession he enters is not the be all and end all he expects it to be. He's also in a relationship that's starting to rot away a bit. And in this one, similarly, he's in this unsatisfactory academic environment. His girlfriend cheats on him. But the theme seems to be that you can let go and go on this very masculine adventure. It's a very masculine desire to kind of, just go on the road, just chuck yourself into a new environment. But unless in that new environment, in that new adventure, unless there's some sort of meaning at the core, there are an awful lot of pitfalls. That seems to be the theme. I wondered if you could unpack that a bit more and discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's about a character who feels inhibited in a kind of stranglehold, in a straitjacket by the sort of systems of modern life, and is just desperate to escape. Um, I think a book can probably, to me, is only interesting if there's at least some notion that things can go really wrong.
Hmm.
And things can't go really wrong if you're, well, they can always go really wrong, but not so likely if you're in a kind of safe routine. So it's about just breaking out of the routine and saying yes to a totally new life. And this is generally held up to be a kind of a positive thing, self-actualization and the kind of eat, pray, love idea of uh, go somewhere new, great things will happen. You'll have fantastic Latin lovers, etc. And I guess this is the kind of antithesis in the sense that, well, you might have a great time, but things can go horribly wrong. Things can get actually a whole lot worse. And it's like a line from, The Sun Also Rises is, I think it's Robert Conn asks Jake, do you want to come to, I can't remember where it is, somewhere in Latin America. And Jake says, you can't just run away from your problems. I've tried that. It doesn't work. That's really wise. And I guess my books are about people who don't take that advice, who try to um, find a totally new life and start again. And well, it doesn't go well.
Yeah. Yes. um, it was well, I guess it was based on your actual experiences why you chose to select paranoia, but it is quite a convincing descent. It starts with that. It starts with that initial robbery, that being shaken, and he descends into paranoia. And I don't know if this reflected your own attitude, but there is a prevailing attitude at the moment, a sort of post globalism idea or narrative about the world that you can just go anywhere now and that everywhere people are the same. And our main character very quickly discovers that that isn't true and that Rio is its own place with its own rules and he doesn't know those rules. Was there any comment there kind of on that wider there still is adventures out there
Yeah,
despite
no, I see what you mean. In a sense, I think more to the point is that his own society and his own life is so monotonous, um, so predictable, safe, comfortable, um, but ultimately bound to lead to him never sort of doing anything, just plodding along, just going with the motions, and just making that decision. And all it is, I'm not sure if you've ever lived abroad, but at some point you just say to yourself, okay, I'm gonna do it. And as soon as you make that decision, it's done. It's as easy as that. I mean, it really is. You can buy a ticket, you can work out the visa, that's not hard, and you can just go anywhere you want, basically, as you said. So I think what really interests me is how easily, you go 2 degrees of course. After long enough, you end up in hell. So I would say that's not the sort of uniformization of the world globally, but the sort of conformity that his own society mandates is what pushes him to just say, okay, I'm gonna try something new.
There is, it's interesting that you say the first half is autobiographical largely because there's an interesting quote which when I've highlighted it and pulled it out of my Kindle, it says kind of meta. I'll read it back to you, but it's where Rick, the main character, is considering writing a novel, and he says he could already see the arc of the narrative. The protagonist has just arrived in Rio, hungry for the delights he believes await him, but ultimately he is seduced by death and madness, crushed under the weight of dark forces which haunt the streets. Perhaps I'll model him on Anton, Rick thought. I thought that was, if anybody hadn't picked up at that point that we were reading something somewhat autobiographical, they should have at that point picked it up.
That's right. It's a book about a guy writing a book who's probably writing
Yes.
about a guy writing a book, etc. Yeah, I think that's also the case. I think it's the case in every book. Is the fact that the protagonist doesn't find meaning in anything, and eventually he starts writing. The book is not at all about being a writer. I mean, the Paris book is a little bit about that, but that's really not the energy of it. But obviously, it's self-referential in a sense. For myself, I spent my whole adult years until the age of late 20s, trying to find not meaning, but kicks, trying to have fun, sort of burn off this surplus of energy that I always feel I have with partying and, alcohol, the rest of it, traveling. And in the end, I started writing, and now I'm a much more actually calm and centered, in many ways boring person, because this is how I have found some meaning myself.
Good. I was just thinking maybe because Dream City is less based on yourself, maybe at the beginning of that you should put based on a true story, and at the beginning of Zona Sul Nights put all the characters are fictional. just to switch it up a bit, just to switch it up on the
just to
reader.
keep them guessing,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I mean, you asked me at the beginning about the order of the books, and I think I'm happy to have the chance to clarify that, because
Yeah.
Zona Sul Nights was the first book I wrote, and it's what sort of it really came out of nowhere. But I started to write this thing because the memories of Brazil and this aesthetic, this mood of paranoia, just would not leave me alone. And I started to plot the novel, and then I started to write, and I just got into it very furiously. And then I sort of put it away and didn't do anything with it. I sent it to a couple of publishers, but knew that it wouldn't be picked up because, well, then moved to Paris, then started the Paris book, then wrote the Sydney book, and then realized, wow, here's a trilogy of novels. And I put out the Sydney book, this one, Dream City, first, simply because, and I'm kind of interested in your take on this. I thought it was the more polished book because it was the last one I wrote, so I'd had that experience. And the kind of the most sort of professional, polished. That said, of course, I went back and re-edited Zona Sul Nights, so it shouldn't be too different. But
No, I agree with that, and I don't know if they are different lengths, but Zona Sul Nights felt shorter and pacier and felt like someone getting something off their chest, whereas Dream City felt more like a calculated pulling the reader through this maze of events. It was, although your style comes through in both of them, and the settings helped. They are different enough that it doesn't feel like you're reading the same stories, even with the common theme.
right,
There is real differences. Yeah, Zona Sul Nights really just felt like you almost like shouted it out onto the page.
Yeah, in retrospect, I actually think I should have put that one out first because the feedback has been frankly better than the feedback of Dream City. So my whole logic is betrayed by reality. Anyway.
I think part of that, I don't think either is better than the other. If I step back objectively, I think they're both like equally good. But I think Zona Sul Nights benefits from reading um, Dream City first,
Mm,
because you do feel like you want that hot, passionate, sweaty book after
mm,
reading Dream City. If you read them the other way around, I don't know if it would be different, but that's certainly I felt it benefited from reading it
mm.
second. So
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. You're sort of like ripping off the suit and
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm. So I was interested as well in having a little chat about the writers who influence you, because I've seen you on other podcasts as well, and perhaps on your bloggers, I might be mistaken, but I think on your blog as well, you talk a lot about Michel Houellebecq. So you seem to be very keen on him. I wondered who else you were interested in, perhaps in the mainstream, in kind of published fiction,
mm,
and if there were any people who were influencing you or you found really good in the kind of independent scene.
mm. Yeah. Um, in terms of my direct influences for the books, I would say the strongest certainly is first of all J.G. Ballard, who I mentioned already, the British writer who died in I think 2009, more or
Mm.
less. I was living in London at the time actually, and I just got into his work the year before, and that's what got me into reading. I was a hopeless school student. I basically failed high school, couldn't go to any university. But I started reading fiction at the age of 19 or 20 in London. J.G. Ballard's High Rise totally changed my life. And Dream City certainly is very much inspired by that novel. I think my own style comes through, I hope, but certainly that's the principal influence. So Ballard, and particularly High Rise, is a big influence. Also, Paul Bowles, who I think is a really underappreciated writer nowadays. He was an American, he was actually originally a composer who lived in Tangier in Morocco for his almost his whole adult life, from his 30s, I think, and he died in his 80s or 90s over there. He wrote four novels only, so not especially prolific for a guy who sort of lay around smoking hashish all day in the Moroccan desert. But he wrote a book called Let It Come Down. His most famous book, I think, is called The Sheltering Sky. I think Let It Come Down is a superior book. That's just an opinion. But it's really about the themes that I think come through in my book. That is, it's about a young American living in New York who has a friend, has a monotonous life as a bank teller in New York City, has a friend in Morocco who says, I have a plum job for you, come over, everything's great. And so he gets on the boat, and he goes, and he says yes to everything. He just wants to experience something new. And he's a moral idiot, is how I've seen him described by contemporaneous reviews. A moral idiot, that is a sort of vessel. He just goes with the flow of events. And that really profoundly affected me, that book. So those two books, High Rise and Let It Come Down, I've just been obsessed with them since I read them, 15 years ago. Other than that, I guess Dostoevsky, paranoia is a big theme
Yeah.
in his work, especially Notes from Underground, also Crime and Punishment. There's I have a sense that there's sort of only like 5 or 6 books that really make you jump out of your chair and it
Mm.
really changes you. But many books that have influenced me in one way or another. Another one is Wake in Fright by Kenneth Cook. He was an Australian guy who wrote this book about a school teacher trying to get to Sydney, from the middle of the Australian desert to Sydney by train to have his holidays. And he stops in this town called Yaba, and he's sort of invited to the pub by the local police officer. And he never makes it out of Yaba, suffice to say. So all sort of similar ideas, you know, a person looking for an escape and finding it, but finding it's not quite what they wanted. In terms of contemporary stuff, you know, I had my review series in which you were featured. Your book was one of my favorites, if not my favorites, my favorite in that series. And there are some real gems among them. I sort of had the sense that there must be guys out there, and I would say egotistically like myself, who are producing interesting stuff, who aren't being picked up by publishers, and who are great and writing great stories. So, you know, if people are interested in checking out my review series, your book is featured there. I loved your book because you had this paranoid mood as well. And I thought that you explored that and this theme of the kind of the business retreat, and then this creepy force, you know, in the hotel. I thought you achieved that really well. So, you know, there's plenty of stuff happening at the moment, which is good work and which isn't being picked up by publishers. But in terms of published mainstream literature, I can't name a single living writer that I find very interesting. Lawrence Osborne is okay. He's a big fan of Paul Bowles, by the way, who I was just talked about, who wrote Let It Come Down. But it doesn't quite.
Michel Houellebecq, perhaps.
Oh,
he's obviously alive. Still, I just check, just Google.
I don't know how
I think he is alive.
Yeah, I forgot. Houellebecq would be the only sort of living writer that I really like. I haven't enjoyed his recent books, to be honest, but Atomized is brilliant. Submission is brilliant. He's great. I love Houellebecq. Yeah, he's great.
Thank you for the compliment about my work. We didn't set that up in advance, if anyone's wondering. But I did notice you did about 10 or 11 reviews in a row.
Yeah.
And it came, you know, your review of my work came out of the blue. And when I read the review, it was I was obviously very pleased. And I was thinking, oh, it must be a soft touch. But I read some of the others, and you were very harsh. So I was even more pleased.
Sometimes I think I might be, I don't know, maybe like autistically blunt, because what I'm writing and I just think it's obvious, and people get offended. But I felt that my reviews, you know, I didn't want to review any book just to shit on it. And you know, like J.L. Mackie, I think he was the first book I reviewed, and it wasn't glowing, but I really liked the book, actually. I just thought something about the ending should have been different. But he didn't like those comments, and I think a couple of other people didn't either. But in general, I was really impressed, if I can say, from my humble position, by all the books I read, and I wouldn't have reviewed a book if I didn't like it. But yours was really great.
I'm glad to hear that. But there was a couple where I've read them as well. I really like J.L. Mackie. That first one he's done was imperfect, but there's a certain kind of charm to it. It's wonderfully original.
It's great. Yeah. I have to read his second release. I'm sure it's even better. But yeah, I thought he was great. I just didn't love the ending. But I think that's a big compliment. That means, you know, I followed it all the way through, and then I just sort of felt like, oh no, but it should have ended differently. Is actually a compliment, I think. You know, if I don't like a book, I just simply stop reading. I stop reading it. I
tend to do that as well.
Yeah, I used to have a policy that if you start reading a book, you should finish it. I totally disclaim that idea now, or do not recommend that idea at all. It's a bad idea. If you don't like a book, just stop reading it.
And so many people who are kind of on the edge of developing a good reading habit have that feeling, and so they never get into reading properly, especially so many men, because they think, oh, I need to finish this book I don't like. But I'm the same. There's too many good books to finish one you're not enjoying.
Yeah, that's right. and it's such a chore. I mean, it's such a chore. I mean, the only exception I would make is Crime and Punishment can be really a bit of a drag at times, but the thing is, you sort of feel that it's going somewhere, so you keep going. So I think the same advice still applies.
But if we can just give Mackie a little shout out as well, because he does publish this magazine as well called The Double Dealer, which is which is like Southern Gothic, Western style short stories. And I mean the latest issue 10, it's wonderful. So it's called The Double Dealer. It's like cheap on Amazon to pick up. It's give that a little look. It's quite
Sure, yeah,
interesting.
I should check it out. I've been sort of, I mean, my personal life has been really insane in the last year, so I've sort of dropped off the scene a bit, but I'm sure he's doing great stuff, and yeah, I have to check it out. Yeah.
And the guys who are creating the sort of environments for other people to publish, like the guys doing the Passages Prize, that's wonderful stuff as well. I mean, those guys are heroes, and even Richard Nichols doing this, just people doing little things. The guys at New Right doing their podcast, it's all fantastic. Just trying to get the just
totally. It's grassroots, you know. There's no support. I mean, none of us are earning a nickel from the reviewing
yeah, exactly.
and all this type of stuff. But it's important. It's important.
I also saw you do a bit of a thread on Twitter about encouraging people to kind of own their own ISBN. And if there is any kind of aspiring writers watching this, that was quite an interesting. I don't do it myself because I'm not in danger of making enough money for it to be a problem. But if there are other aspiring writers, do you want to go into that a little bit? Why you think that writers should?
The ISBN thing, I think it's just a case of if you don't and you want to publish your book as a Kindle on Amazon, they take exclusive rights to it. And so, yeah, there's like a kind of technical reason, because it's sort of a year since I published the book, but there's some technical reason with Amazon whereby, yeah, that's right. If you want to publish anywhere else, Apple Books, or you can't if you sign up for the Amazon free ISBN. So it costs it's different in every jurisdiction, but it's sort of like £20 or €30 or something like that. And even if you have no real expectations concerning your book, it's well worth it, because you don't want to give exclusivity. Amazon's a great service, but you don't want to give them exclusive rights to sell your book. It's not smart.
And you've written about the sort of the writer lifestyle as well, and how you feel that Paris is kind of one of the less places where you can still indulge in a sort of bohemian, semi-full-time writer lifestyle, even if you're not a kind of living off your writing full time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you described your life a little bit, like you kind of teach a bit, I understand, and you've got like a regular chess game or something that you attend. You also, and then you spend the rest of your time kind of writing, drinking coffee. Do you want to go into that a little bit and how you stumbled into that?
Whiskey sour, more like it.
Okay.
I just finished my whiskey sour. No, I'm not an alcoholic by any means. But no, in terms of the lifestyle here in Paris, yeah, I mean, I sort of dropped out. I was living in London and on a really serious career path, and went through all the steps to have a serious kind of legal career, and I just got to that point where it was time to commit to it, and just found that I just couldn't. I didn't want to, but I really couldn't. I think I would have sort of maybe lasted a year and just quit anyway. So I just didn't see the point, and I moved here, originally for a girl that's in the past. But I stayed because I've managed to have a pretty fulfilling life, in the sense that I've been teaching at universities, good universities, Sorbonne and Nanterre University. Nanterre is where Macron and Sarkozy studied. And so that's been fun and fulfilling. And on the side, the same story with all adjunct academics, private tutoring, which is much more, pays much better. But I've recently set up a legal translation business with a colleague. So yeah, I've managed to balance a relatively stimulating sort of professional life, with which I'm having real problems at the moment, but nevertheless, with having time, to write. I probably work, I would say on average, I work kind of 20 hours a week, which by Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American or Australian standards is like, you're like a bum. I mean, you're literally like a bum. I mean, who does that? But that's the Protestant work ethic. They see it differently here. So I think I just sort of fit in here. I didn't feel like I really fit in. Although I love London and I love Sydney. I don't know what it is, but I just sort of didn't really fit, And when I started working 3 days a week at my job in London, at a big four accounting firm, and I told my manager why I wanted to do that. I said, I told him I want to have more time to sort of work on creative projects, and the look of pity in his eyes, it was like, wow, okay, Richard. I mean, sure, good luck. It was like he felt pity for me. And honestly, I did that. I worked 3 days a week in London, and I had a job which paid enough because I was paid by the day to permit that. But it just felt wrong. Everyone is at work all the time here in Paris, and I found it so hard to meet people in London. Here in Paris, I have tons of friends. I found it easy to meet people who are kind of like me. Tons of people who sort of have various things going on, part-time actor or, part-time translator, part-time musician, people who make a kind of career work, but do something else and don't see work as the be all and end all. Of course, it's important. And I also have friends who have serious careers, and that's great. That's great too. But I'm just not like built for that. So I've managed to find a sort of place here that works. Yeah.
It reminds me of the old joke. If you say to someone in the city, "Oh, I do a 40-hour week," they say, "What do you do after Wednesday?" Yeah, so
exactly.
but go on.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, why? What do you get money from it, but you don't have time to spend the money? So look, each to their own, but money is important, but I'm not driven by a kind of career prestige, as some people are, especially in the legal world. It's a very ego-driven world. And again, I have friends who are lawyers, and that's fine, but I'm just not built like that. So.
And a couple of questions. We're getting kind of towards an hour now, so probably a good opportunity to wrap up. But a couple of questions to finish. What's next creatively? I see you flirted as well with short stories. I wondered if there was any kind of short story collection or something in the future. And then lastly, if you want people to find you, where's the best place for them to find you? Right.
In terms of what I'm working on, so when I spoke to Richard last time, he asked me, what are you working on now? What's next? And it kind of caught me off guard because, I just finished the 3 books, and it was such written over 5-6 years, such a big thing that was finally done. And the question caught me off guard because I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know. And I sort of felt embarrassed that, well, you're a writer, you should be working on something. And I had a moment where I thought, is that it? I mean, am I done? Is it just those three things I needed to get off my chest? Have I, gone down this path and realized, like one of the characters in my books, that it's the wrong path? But now I have the opposite problem, which is I have too much stuff on my plate. Like I said, I started this translation thing, which is taking up a huge amount of time. Sorry, I'm giving you a long answer, by the way.
That's all right. No, that's fine.
I recently got married. I'm moving flat. I'm going to Australia soon for a holiday. So I had a really intense year, But now I've had time. Everything's kind of settled, and now I have a ton of things on my plate. I'm working actually on an essay collection, because I've had kind of 10. I realized this recently. I've had around 10 essays published in various places on sort of Paris-related or France-related subjects. And I've written about 8 others that either didn't get published or I published on my blog. And I've sort of reworked them to make them better. And I'm getting close to having an essay collection put together, which, let's see what, if anything, becomes of that. A short story collection I also would like to do. I've got kind of 15 short stories that I'm happy with, that I'd like to, write a few more and put it together into something. And finally, believe it or not, I'm writing another, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's another installment in this, trilogy. This is the 4th installment of a trilogy. There you go. That's kind of my normal way of putting things together, that is totally disorganized and haphazard. But yeah, I'm writing a book set in London, a novel. I've written 5 chapters, and it's about a celebrity writer who becomes obsessed with the girl who works in the newsagent opposite his Soho apartment. So normally, obviously, the girl would become obsessed with the celebrity, and this is kind of an inversion. And anyway, it leads him down a kind of dark path, and the normal kind of city limit type of narrative. So I've had to take a break from that because I'm working on this essay collection. But I'll try to get that published as a standalone work. If not, it will be the 4th installment in the Dream City, let's call it the Dream City cycle.
Very good. And if people want to find your work, where should they go?
Probably Twitter. I mean, I suck at Twitter. I hate Twitter, but it's put me in touch with people. It's great in some ways, and it's like great 1% of the time and shitty and just nasty the rest of the time. But Twitter, RJS Writes, is my handle, so that's where people can find me.
Okay. Thank you very much. And when I get round to reading the 3rd one, we might have you on again. So thanks for your time.
Thanks so much. It was great to talk to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
See ya.